As everyone is aware, the date for Brexit is just around the corner, and the withdrawal agreement is yet to be concluded. Without such a withdrawal agreement, there can be no negotiations on the nature of the future trade relationship between the EU and the UK. Nor will there be a transitional period during which the UK could remain within the single market for a limited period of time. In that case, the EU and the UK would begin to trade under WTO rules. Now, on behalf of the 15 major Europe-based car, van, truck and bus manufacturers that ACEA represents, my objective today is to highlight how potentially catastrophic such a no-deal Brexit would be for the automotive industry. I think I can safely claim that there is no other industry that is more tightly integrated than the European automotive industry across its value chain. And this is due to two key factors. First of all, there is a highly complex automotive supply chains stretching across Europe, which Sigrid will explain in a moment. And second, because of the manufacturer's business model, which is totally reliant on just-in-time and just-in-sequence delivery and production. Now, the production plans of all our members, be they in the UK, where there are approximately 30 production facilities, or be they in the EU 27, where we have more than 300 assembly and production facilities. So these production plants receive and fit millions and millions of parts into vehicles every single day. Their operations rely on these parts being delivered on time, on a daily basis, without any delays or obstacles. And not everybody fully realizes this, but the automotive manufacturers do not stock up their needed parts and components in their plants. Manufacturers in automotive generally don't have warehouses. Instead, the parts they require to assemble a car are in constant transit. They are in trucks making their way to the destination, arriving as and when they are needed. To give you an idea of the magnitude of this situation, every day, 1,100 EU trucks cross the channel, 1,100 EU trucks cross the channel every day to deliver to car and engine plants in the UK alone. This is our industry's business model. It works, and so far it's cost efficient. So if Britain comes crashing out of the EU without a deal in March next year, what will happen in the hours and days that follow? Now, first of all, we fear delays at the port. The introduction of customs procedures where there were none before is obviously going to cause delays at ports. It's estimated that just 2 extra minutes of checks could triple queues at ports. The vision of containers with vital parts and components for automotive assembly stuck in long tailbacks outside ports on both sides of the channel is therefore both realistic and very worrisome. Even short hold-ups at customs borders will cause massive logistical problems for manufacturers, generating significant costs. Even if just one single part is missing, a car simply cannot roll off the assembly line. It won't take long for production to suffer. Our members are already making contingency plans and are looking for warehouse spaces for stockpiling parts. But the space required to stockpile for more than a short time of production would be absolutely huge and expensive. Some ACEA members are even planning a temporary post-Brexit shutdown. But the harsh fact is that no amount of contingency planning can realistically cover all the gaps left by the UK's withdrawal from the EU on WTO terms. Then there are the customs procedures. As well as causing disruption to the manufacturing process, a no-deal outcome would of course result in very burdensome customs procedures, entailing vast amount of red tape with thousands of new documents to fill in. Again, all this will cost time and money. Then there will be the tariffs. No deal would also mean the end of duty-free trading. Under WTO rules, a 10% tariff would be applied to all cars traded between the EU and UK. And be aware that profit margins in our industry are significantly lower than 10%. So at the end of the day, these extra costs will either have to be passed on to consumers or be absorbed by the manufacturers. Either way, the competitiveness of European manufacturers will be compromised in an already very challenging market. Other element which will be important to us, type approval. EU law requires that cars are tested by a national technical service to verify compliance with environmental, safety and security standards before they can be put on the market anywhere in the European Union, the so-called type approval system. It is essential that manufacturers can maintain valid type approvals in both the EU and the UK as of March 30th, 2019, no matter where the approval was issued. Be aware the European Commission has prepared a draft proposal for a regulation that would allow a type approval authority in the European Union to reissue an approval originally issued by the UK. While we have some concerns on the technical detail of this Commission's proposal, we welcome and support this initiative and hope to see the new regulation published before the end of this year. We also welcome the UK government's recent pledge to also allow for a streamlined registration process for approvals currently held under one of the authorities of EU27 with the UK Department of Transport. I come to my conclusion, ladies and gentlemen. I'm sure it's now clear that the absence of a phased implementation of Brexit will have severe consequences for our members, negatively impacting their profitability, car prices, and even employment, because at the end of the day, also people will be affected. The clock is ticking, but it's not yet too late, and that's why we are urging the UK and EU negotiating teams on both sides to redouble their efforts to successfully conclude a withdrawal deal. The responsibility lies with the negotiators to deliver a successful agreement. Their burden is a heavy one, but a political deal that reflects the business realities of European economic integration is the only way in which we can minimize the impact on all aspects of our economy. To make things as concrete as possible, we thought it would be useful to invite one of our member companies, in this case BMW, to explain the experience of one automotive manufacturer with a presence in several European countries, including the UK. So let me hand over to Stefan Kruijsmuth to tell us how BMW is preparing for a Brexit worst case scenario. Thank you. Stefan, the floor is yours.
Thank you.
Just to mention, Stefan is going to run through these slides which you have in front of you as well.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Eric. As we heard, Brexit is reality, and that's exactly the way we have to go. We have to take the Brexit serious, and we have to do everything to mitigate the impact of the upcoming Brexit. The BMW Group, or in other words, the UK is the fourth biggest sales market for the BMW Group. But we are really concerned if we look to our production plants in the UK, and currently we have 4 production plants. We have one production plant at Goodwood where we're producing the Rolls-Royce. We have one additional production plant in Oxford where we are producing the Mini. We have 2 part production facilities, one in Swindon where we're pressing parts and components, and also one engine plant in Hampshire where we're producing the engines. All 4 production plants are not only producing for the local market for the UK, they are highly integrated in our European production network. This means we are producing parts, engines in the UK, which we are not only using for the Mini production in the UK, we are using these parts and components also in the production of our cars on the European mainland. And so we are in a very difficult and specific situation, because we have a lot of border crossing transactions between the production plants on the European mainland and the UK plants as well. If we are having a detailed look on our plant in Oxford, for example, you can see that, I mentioned it also in the PowerPoint slide, that we are mainly producing there for the export. only 20% of the produced minis remaining or will be used in the UK. All the rest will be exported, and for around about 40% of the minis will be exported to the European mainland. So you can see, and it's a similar situation in all the other plants, that we are mainly producing for exporting cars and components. Yeah, and that's the way we are preparing, because we have no intention to reduce our production capacity in the UK. We have the intention to keep the production capacity as high as it is today. And all our preparations, especially from a customs and also from a logistic perspective, we are doing in that way that we maintain business continuity in our production plants. If you have a more detailed look on the flow of goods between our UK plants and the plants on the European mainland, around about 150 trucks are coming from the European mainland and arriving at our UK plants. And these 150 trucks per day are containing only production materials. In the other direction, around about 120 trucks are leaving our UK plants with destination in the European mainland. For all these plants, there will be a need in the future for customs clearance. You have to, at first, you have to clear the goods for export, and at second, on the other side, you have to clear the goods for import. And it doesn't matter how the result of the negotiations will be in the end, there will be a kind of customs border in any scenario. And that's also the way we are preparing. So we are adapting our IT systems, we are adapting our customs processes, and we are also speaking to our supply network to do the necessary preparations for being ready for importing and exporting goods. Unfortunately, even if we are preparing quite well, and also if our supply network is preparing quite well, we have to face some impacts which will occur at the logistic hubs. For example, if we are speaking about Eurotunnel, the get linked, or if we are speaking about the port of Dover, for example. We had talks with both, and we have realized that the situation at these logistic hubs will be really serious, because there's no infrastructure and there are no processes available, especially at the Eurotunnel, where it's possible to clear goods for customs. So if we have a look to the Eurotunnel on the UK side, there's really a cliff edge from the end. So there's no space available to expand the infrastructure. They have only a space to store 200 trucks, yeah, and it's not possible to expand this trailer yard for storing more trucks. So they have no chance to do something like that, and also there are no systems, no infrastructure in place to do any kind of customs clearance. And if we go outside of the automotive industry, if we are talking about agriculture goods, for example, where specific checks have to be performed at an upcoming customs border, they told us that it will take more than 10 years to build up infrastructure to perform physical checks for agriculture goods, and that's something also we have to consider. It's not only the automotive industry which has to clear goods at the border, also other sectors will have problems, and so everybody of us will be really has to take this really serious. So there's definitely a need to adapt customs and logistics processes, but also there's a need to have a transitional period, because we, the BMW, we have done a lot in preparing our supply network, and you see on the next chart, this is a small insight into the result of a Brexit survey we performed with our supply network, and we performed this survey last year, at the end of last year, and around about 1,600 suppliers have joined this survey, and we had a response rate of 85%, so the result of the survey is really representative from our perspective. And to summarize the result, in average 50% of the suppliers are really prepared for Brexit because they have now, or have already today, customs expertise. They have expertise in clearing goods for export, import. They're using simplifications, but the rest of the suppliers, and these are the other 50%, have no or not sufficient expertise in clearing goods for customs. And the reason for this, it wasn't necessary in the past because these suppliers had only transactions within the European Union. So there was no need to have knowledge in clearing goods for export or clearing goods for import. And so these suppliers are starting, they are really at the starting point. They have to set up experience, they have to set up their own infrastructure, their own processes for clearing goods for customs. And it doesn't matter if they set up infrastructure internally or if they want to use a customs broker, but now they have to prepare for that. And I performed this survey within a Brexit conference 2 weeks ago. It was a mixed delegation. The participants came from different industrial associations, and the research of the survey was nearly the same. So we can see also today there are a lot of businesses outside who are not really well prepared for Brexit. And these businesses need more time to prepare, really well prepare for Brexit. Thank you very much.
Okay, that's very interesting, and it leads nicely into Sigrid's insight on the impact for suppliers.
Yes, absolutely. Good morning, everyone. CLIPA, as Karel already said, is the European Association of Automotive Suppliers. So the car manufacturers are the customers of our members. And CLIPA in total represents about 3,000 companies across Europe, including in the UK, also through our national associations that are members, and in the UK that is, for example, the SMMT. So we are closely aligned with our members everywhere. I would like to really stress that the European automotive suppliers are our key asset to the European economy. Parts and component manufacturers are among the biggest private investors in research and innovation, and in total in manufacturing in the automotive sector about 5 million people are employed, and one job in our sector often leads to another 3 down the value chain. I think it's also worthwhile stressing that automotive suppliers are highly innovative companies, so they're technology solution providers, and they deliver the safe and smart and sustainable mobility solutions for the future, and the innovations in the sector are often also used in very different sectors of the industry and the economy. And as Erik already said, the automotive industry will be deeply impacted by Brexit, because the automotive industry is really a textbook example of how it has used and how it has benefited from the internal market, from the integration made possible by the European Union. The automotive supply chain is highly integrated, and that makes it really stronger also in the global competition. As just mentioned, the UK is Europe's second biggest new car market, but it's also a significant manufacturing country with, on the side of suppliers, around 2,500 component makers, and that includes also global players. About 20 of the world-leading suppliers have operations in the UK. And to illustrate a bit more the deep integration, about 79% of imported automobile components into the UK are coming from the EU, and 65% of British-built components are then exported to the EU. And at least 10% of people employed in the UK automobile sector are from elsewhere in the EU. So indeed, people are involved very much too, and it's very important for our sector that the free movement of skilled workers remains possible. Our goal is really to build upon the success story of recent years and to minimize the impact on our industry of the UK leaving the European Union. But, and it was already said, this will certainly not be easy. And the journey of a vehicle component clearly tells you why. A single vehicle consists of around 30,000 parts, and a single part may be composed again of over about 30 components and undergo 100 process steps to become a finished product. So such a part may pass through 15 countries and cross borders multiple times in its material journey. And that includes, of course, channel crossings. Final component plants are located very closely to the customer, but these plants themselves are being supplied by a huge network of manufacturers located throughout the EU. So I would like to call attention also for the impact on small and medium-sized companies. As my colleague from BMW just said, these smaller and mid-sized companies, they trade cross-border in the EU including to and with the UK, as if they trade with the town next door. So after Brexit, this will fundamentally change. And larger companies, they have experience with trading globally. They have in-house expertise and are accustomed to trading globally, and that also goes for our global players in our membership. They know how to apply for export and import licenses, and they know how to fill out customs declarations. But smaller companies often do not have that kind of expertise. They do not have the internal systems, the IT platforms, or the staff in place to deal with tariff classification, customs valuation, calculations based on content of origin. All these things they had never really to look into or build expertise on. And then there is also the logistical risk of having goods held up at the border, meaning they would have to build up inventory. So SMEs will be forced to deal with at least some of these issues if they want to continue to trade under preferential terms, or if their clients, such as BMW or other OEMs, require them to provide the necessary details. Anything that changes or puts barriers to the free flow of parts will simply have an adverse effect on the competitiveness of companies and the sector as a whole. Eric already said tariffs are really a no-go, but administrative and regulatory burdens are just as significant, and we asked our members, and percentages of cost and shares of cost differ, but it is estimated that it may add between 4 and 15% to the cost of manufacturing, these non-tariff barriers, as you could call them. And the other important element to mention is that maintaining a mechanism for ongoing alignment of the regulatory requirements is fundamental too, to ensure at least the consistency of regulations and standards between the EU and the UK, and take into account where necessary the mutual recognition. And that goes for type approval too. The validity of type approval issued by the UK and the EU in the past, they must remain valid also in the years to come. And that's not just important for new vehicles manufacturers, but also for repair and maintenance, because cars that are already on the road require maintenance, they require spare parts, and their partly type approval is important too, to keep these parts flowing cross-border. So in sum, tariff and burden-free market access, as well as a stable and predictably regulatory framework, are crucial instruments to sustain the supplier industry's technology leadership and to secure investments and jobs on both sides of the channel. That's why it remains crucially important to provide clarity on the future relation with the UK as quickly as possible, starting with the withdrawal agreement, so that a cliff edge can be avoided. CLIPA also has recently surveyed its membership, and the most important feedback was remove uncertainty. It's a key concern for business. They are not so well prepared, but a part of the reason for that is that they cannot really prepare because they do not know what to prepare for exactly. So it's a real issue. Remove uncertainty, provide enough transition time. That's important. It's in Europe's and in the UK's interest to support the sector's integrated value chain with frictionless trade, and to continue thereby to reap the benefits from this key manufacturing industry within their perimeters. And with that, I'd like to hand over to Roberto Valassoi, who is indeed member of the management board of Brembo, a braking system supplier, and he's also the president, chairman of CLIPA. Please.
Thanks, Sigrid. Thanks everybody for listening and attending this conference. If you get properly that 80% of the content of a vehicle is made up by components, you immediately feel how important it is that an uninterrupted supply of components can flow throughout Europe in order to produce any sort of vehicles. the UK industry, the UK automotive industry, has known a spectacular comeback over the last 20 years, because everybody of you may remember, some of you maybe are too young, but the very bad situation where the industry was 20 years ago. This has been possible thanks to a lot of direct investment from every companies in the world, in the four corners of the world. Japanese came investing, French companies, German companies, US companies, and also Italian companies, some of them. I belong to one of these companies, and let me tell you, we until now just described facts, very important, but the feeling beyond this fact is that I feel betrayed. I know this is not changing anything, but 15 years ago we went to the Midlands buying a company, feeling that we were establishing a footprint in one part of the European house. Now it is changing quite a bit, and it is no longer the case. I know we cannot blame anybody or everybody, I don't know, but at the end we have to face a totally different situation. Now we have been talking about goods, fundamental, but don't misevaluate or don't underestimate the importance of skilled people. Because UK is missing a skilled engineer in the automotive sector, and we know this directly because we find difficult to hire people in our company up in the Midlands. And I want to represent to you the two scenarios. One is exporting to UK from other countries in the mainland, and what is exporting from Europe. Up to now, my company, from January to end of September, provided 5,000 shipments to UK from Italy, from Poland, from Czech Republic, from Germany. 5,000, not full containers, of course, because the way the industry is providing manufacturing today is that you send also small parcels if they are needed. You even deliver nighttime parts that are needed to be sequenced and produced exactly for that color of, let's say, calipers to match one Mini that wants to be built exactly to specification. I was told, and you may correct me, that out of the production of Mini, no more than 10 Minis are exactly the same finishing of another. So you understand the difficulty to sequence every part of a car today in our industry. This is essential. So 5,000, that will be 6,000 shipments from my company at the end of the year. But the company we own in the Midlands is not less exposed, because it is mainly involved in motorsport. We supply a number of F1 and motorsport teams. Imagine what is a border representing to ship via air freight parts that are needed for the F1 teams waiting desperately them in Singapore, you say, in Australia, in any other country. This is simply dramatic. This is adding complexity. This is adding cost and risks to a huge business. What is to be understood? It is important to me. This is a net loss to any player in the scenario, because this is a net increase of cost to suppliers. This is a net increase of cost and inefficiency to the vehicle makers. This is a net loss for consumers, not only for the devaluation already more than 12%, so they are paying currently much more the vehicles they buy, but also because they will pay more because of this indirect cost. I rule out for the time being any duty, but also for the public authority. As we have been listening, imagine what will be the cost of setting infrastructure for nothing today, to set borders, to set controls, to set this sort of increased bureaucracy in a time where everybody in Europe are trying to get rid of some bureaucracy. So I finish with a sense of frustration, saying that I wouldn't rule out completely that in a few years from now, if we are continuing to be taken hostage of this situation, the UK flourishing industry for automotive could come back to the situation where it was 20 or 25 years ago. Everybody of you remember the rotten buildings in Leamington with the red bricks that were hosting production that are no longer there. So I sincerely hope that our industry is no longer taken as an hostage of this negotiation. We know it is a complex negotiation involving a number of issues, but this industry, these people, these companies honestly and transparently investing in one corner of Europe couldn't be betrayed as they are today. Thanks.
Thank you very much, everyone. We'll open now for questions. If you could just say first your name and who your question is directed at. We'll start with Pascal.
Yes, Pascal Zenz from Agence Europe. I have several questions, but I will just limit myself to two first questions. You talked about a lot about a no-deal situation, but you didn't mention what would be for you the best situation, the best type of deal that could be, what could be a successful agreement for you? And related to this question is, did you meet or are you going to meet Michel Barnier and the Brexit Minister Dominic Raab in order to highlight your point of view? Thank you.
But first of all, we are of course in contact with the negotiators. That's clear. I mean, we haven't waited until today to raise our voice on this subject, both on the UK side as well as in Brussels. They are aware of our concerns and they are aware of the challenges which our industry would face in the case of the absence of a withdrawal agreement. When it comes to what is the best possible scenario for, first of all, we realize that these negotiations are highly political. And at the end, okay, we have trust in the negotiators to come up with a deal which is going to be balanced and reasonable and takes into account the implications for the different businesses, including ours, to be affected. It's not up to us to dictate clearly what and how. Okay? Again, as Sigrid said before, what is key for us now is clarity, is providing certainty. Because Brexit, whatever the outcome will be of the negotiations, will have implications on all our businesses. And as you already heard, even if many of us in the automotive industry are preparing for the worst case scenario, because we cannot just keep waiting, we need clarity. Again, so a lot of companies out there are waiting for clarity, for guidance, so that they can prepare for that properly. One of the things which is going to be important in the withdrawal agreement is clarity on the transition periods. Okay. So we know currently there is discussion about 21 months as transition period, starting as from the effective date of the withdrawal agreement, during which you could say the internal market would still be maintained between the UK and the rest of the European Union, and during which measures could then be further taken to deal with what will happen afterwards. But as you already heard from the different interventions, we think 21 months is going to be quite short, especially when you think of the need of additional investments in infrastructure, especially at the borders, to ensure a smooth transition of goods from one side to the other. Yeah. Again, we recognize that a lot of countries on the European side, as well as in the UK, are starting to prepare for this, but there's still a long way to go to get everything in place. And as my colleague from BMW already highlighted, there are the practicalities like the space, the capacity available at borders for trucks to be parked during the time that customs controls are needed. That in itself already sounds to be so minimal that it doesn't look like there's going to be enough in order to ensure this smooth transition. So again, we leave it in the good hands of the negotiators. We have trust and confidence that they will come up with a balanced outcome, because the implications for their economies are, at the end of the day, huge. It's not only impact on business, as also was made clear by Mr. Vavasori, it is having an impact on people.
From the supplier side, I believe the best scenario is a borderless and certainly duty-less sort of continuation of what is the situation today. We know we cannot interfere with the highly complex and political negotiation, but again, this is certainly the only ideal scenario we see. The continuation of the current situation, because anything else will add unreasonable cost for nothing.
Yeah, I think it's important to really stress that this industry is a global industry. So they're all global players, even the smaller one in the sector. So the competition is with other regions in the world. And this will make Europe and the UK less competitive. So the continuation of frictionless trade and free movement of skilled workers would be really important. And there are no winners in this. There are only losers. So indeed, we cannot preempt any political decision and outcome, but it's clear what industry needs, and that is economy of scale, access to markets around the globe, and a competitive home base. And the manufacturing base in Europe is incredibly important for the economy, for industry. Innovation is here, research and development is here, and that's what they want to continue doing.
Anne Gaelic, German television CTF. News this morning is that they obviously proposed in the negotiations a longer transition period of 3 years.
Yeah.
What is your comment on that? And also, Theresa May, this Chequers plan foresaw that there would be certain exemptions for certain industries to stay in the internal market. Would that be actually a good way for you?
Well, I think looking into a longer transition period, as Erik just mentioned, would be positive because of the complexity. We already see now queues at the type approval authorities for reasons not even related to Brexit. So there is more time needed. That would be good. There's such a complexity, and once there is clarity, then to allow also the companies to prepare for what comes next would be incredibly important. On the other issues of, again, I think these are very complex negotiations. We do not really want to influence that. We just want to stress what it is that our sector needs and what would be in the interest of Europe, and we hope that policymakers take that into account.
And personally, if I may add, I fear transition. Because transition means you take a journey towards a destination. Which is the destination ultimately is important, absolutely important to be known and not to be modified during the journey. We already had some not brilliant example. And also specific, let's say, licensing, so to speak, is very difficult to apply, because if you take a seat, a car seat, you take into textile, rubber, foam, the needles needed to make that textile. If you take materials like aluminum, the same. I mean, it is very difficult to discipline only the ultimate good if you're not taking into account also all of the preparatory materials. We use carbon fibers up in the Midlands, but carbon fibers are used also for many other sectors. So I believe it is extremely complex to define in full a manufacturing exemption for a specific sort of industry. This is my impression.
I think Philip, you had a question.
Philip Blenkinsop of Reuters. Well, I have two questions. One is more particularly for BMW and you, Mr.
Brembo.
Yeah, Brembo, exactly. I just wondered, you've obviously kind of warned about the problems of a no deal. I just wondered, can you kind of detail a little bit what your preparations have been for a no deal, and also just to count, there's 163 days until Brexit. There comes presumably a point at which you're not going to wait till March the 29th and go, okay, well, we're going to switch to the Brexit plan, sorry, a no-deal Brexit plan rather. At what point, and maybe there's sort of staging points, do you kind of have to switch? Because obviously we know we're not going to have a withdrawal agreement this week. It's kind of pushes into November. There comes a sort of a time pressure for industry, as you say. You have to kind of make plans, and presumably at a certain point you've got to go, well, we have to go with the Brexit plan, and then I don't know whether it's all of you or at least maybe more for the people from the associations. You're obviously aware of the okay, there is a checkers plan, but the British position is generally speaking, red lines of no customs union, no single market. What does that mean? Because presumably it also means a number of the same problems you've outlined with Brexit in terms of customs controls, non-frictionless trade. I mean, obviously the EU has said, we cannot accept a checkers plan. You can have a Canada plus. I mean, who knows what the 3 pluses mean, but it's obviously it's something less, and it's not the same situation. So sorry, that's two questions, which is preparedness for no deal, and then what does the Canada plus mean?
Yeah, as I already stressed out, leaving the customs union, leaving the single market will have the impact that there will be a customs border between the UK and the European Union. That's something which cannot be avoided from a legal and from a customs perspective. But there are mechanisms which enable a seamless border. So we know, for example, the possibility for self-assessment, which is already covered by the European Customs Code. And this is one example for simplifying customs clearance at the border, and one possibility to shift customs clearance at the border to, for example, local customs offices. This would be the first step to mitigate the impact directly at the customs border. This is something we are always proposing, self-assessment in combination with different simplifications we are knowing quite well, which are covered by the European Customs Code. Regarding the checkers plan, the checkers plan is the first step in the right direction. But in detail, if we have analyzed this proposal in detail, if this will it be applicable in practice, and honestly speaking, there will be some difficulties to implement the ideas of the checkers plan in practice. But at the end, it's a first step in the right direction, and there will be definitely more time to use the ideas of checkers plan, to consider the red lines on both sides, to consider the red lines on the UK side and also the red lines on the European side, to find a common understanding, to find a common position how frictionless trade can be in the future, and how the future trade relationship should look like between the European Union and the UK. Regarding the preparations, even if the probability is low for having a cliffage scenario, for having a hard Brexit, there's no other chance for us to prepare the worst case. That's the reason why we are preparing the worst case. Otherwise, of course, we are hoping that there will be a deal, that there will be a best case, or that they will find a solution to avoid all the administrative workload, all the impacts of Brexit.
On our side, some cost has already started to pile up as our fellow customers have been asking us to provide contingency plans and questionnaires and audits, and this already some cost that we would have escaped quite happily. I wouldn't say that it is impossible to have a hard Brexit for our industry. It is certainly possible. We will go back as dealing with Canada or Australia. Simply, it is not necessary. And it is bringing a lot of cost. This is to me, the worst short impact, short time frame impact scenario. But the longer worst case to me is more worrying, because at the end, if manufacturing things or exporting things to UK is becoming less profitable to you, would you continue to do that in an ultra competitive world like our industry today, where every sort of players are fighting and our customers continuously asking us the last penny or the last euro cent to be spared and saved? This is the real fundamental question. It is not the immediate transition or what else. To me, it's the long-term sustainability of the UK manufacturing, both for components and for cars. Sorry being a bit blunt, but this is my view.
Yes, you.
I have a question for Stefan. You said that you are not going to reduce your capacity in the UK, but we've heard comments earlier from BMW saying that Minis, the production of Minis can start in the Netherlands. Is that still being considered? And also, what is your estimate of the no-deal Brexit for the automotive industry? The chief executive of Jaguar Land Rover said earlier that it could be up to £1.2 billion a year. Do you have your own estimate? Thank you.
Yeah, but first, as I already mentioned, it's not our intention to change something in our production capacity, and it's also not, at first, it's not our intention to change production or to shift production, of course. But for example, if we're talking about Brexit, we also have to consider the impact to the application of European Free Trade Agreements. And of course, we want to qualify our products for preferential treatment by applying the European Free Trade Treaties. And I already explained that we have an engine production plant in the UK where we're using the engines, for example, for the production of the BMWs produced on the European mainland. And for that reason, if we go that way further, then our cars won't qualify for preferential treatment. And so we had to start preparations to make a change of production. So capacities of engines which are produced, for example, in Steyr, in our engine plant in Steyr, are moved to the UK, and otherwise production volume of our engine plant in Hamsel is moved to Steyr, so that if we are producing cars which will be exported to free trade partner states, that these cars are only containing materials, or especially the core materials, which are produced in the European Union to maintain our high local content threshold to be possible to benefit from preferential treatment also in the future. That's a change we are doing, but we are not considering to change production volumes from one plant to another. So the capacity in every plant will be the same.
And your estimates for the industry, how much it will cost the industry?
Well, on an industry, first of all, there are no figures on the OEM side, because the impact is going to be different from company to company. Every company is different in that respect. You have those manufacturing vehicles, finished products only. You have those who are also involved in the production of engines, sometimes also parts and components, like we heard from the BMW. Some have more production facilities in the UK, others not. So at the end of the day, I mean, what we already can say for sure, everybody will be affected. I mean, so it's definitely not kind of a black and white scenario where those who are producing in the UK and exporting from the UK would be the only one negatively affected. I mean, again, given the integrated business model, even manufacturers producing on the mainland are importing parts and components from the UK, or those producing in the UK are importing parts and components from the European mainland, as we heard from Mr. Papasori. So there will be impacts. It will have an increase on cost, and it will have an impact on competitiveness.
I think there was a question here from Peter, and then
Peter, SIFP. You partly already answered my question. This was about if there are certain companies, certain sectors, or perhaps within BMW, for example, certain models that are more concerned than others.
Look, I mean, let me answer for the OEM side, and then Klepa or Mr. Papasori can respond on the supplier side. Again, as I said, everybody's affected, and I can tell you when we have discussions with our members and with their CEOs, they will highlight that Brexit is going to be a big, will have an impact on their business model, and will have an impact on cost overall. I mean, so impact there will be. How much? Yes, there are going to be differences between companies, but it's not a good news show.
No, exactly. I think there will be an impact on everyone. I mean, suppliers, they want to be near to their customers. So they will, if there will be more parts sourced in the UK, they will of course look at opportunities there. However, as I already said, these parts and components consist also of parts and components. So it's not that when you source in a country that you are rid of the problem. That it just moves down the value chain. And then again, as Mr. Papasori just said, you will have to look at competitiveness. Is it competitive to then go close to your customers and manufacture there, or rather to continue or invest in the mainland and then export and are confronted with the administrative burdens or even tariffs if they would apply. So it's a very complex picture, and every company will need to make their own decisions and build their strategies. It's certainly not clear cut, and there is not a win here and a loser there. It's very complex.
And it is a bit ironical because in the UK we produce things that normally are not staying into the UK but are exported, while on the mainland Europe we produce things that go to complete cars and also motorcycles in the UK. Per se, at least for our company, locating in the UK this production doesn't make any sense, because you cannot produce a few thousand carbon ceramic discs only for the McLarens or the Aston Martin of the situation. You need to be efficient, because this is an ultra competitive logistic chain, and you need to be competitive in manufacturing in the best location. Could be Germany, could be Italy in the case of carbon ceramic brakes. Then shipped with small trucks, of course very quick trucks, to sequence the cars that our customers are wanting. This is going to be disruptive. This is to be clearly understood. This is going to be disruptive. We will need to provide shipments for 1 week in advance, not to be fined by our customers because of the late arrival of the parts and the stopping of their manufacturing line. This is the reality we are facing. Therefore, when we talk about cost, as minimum, it will be the bureaucracy and the logistic caravan that could be 5 to 7% in some cases, depending on the cost of the part, plus this all new stock, provisions, warehousing for nothing, basically.
Question here from Emma.
Thank you very much. Emma Picker with the Wall Street Journal. To piggyback a little bit on my colleague here's question, at what point do these competitiveness issues become so difficult that you'd make a decision to switch out of the UK and concentrate on the EU-only production? You seem to be a little bit more pessimistic about it, Mr. Sorry, but Stefan, maybe you could also talk about, I mean, you're very committed to maintaining the existing capacities, but also taking into FTAs and the difficulties, potential delays, disruptions to supply chains. You know, what kind of elements are at play to make those decisions, and do you have a timeline in mind, to a trial period, if you will, to say, we're going to look at how things go for X amount of time after the transition period and so forth. And separately, we were very focused on, you know, parts and auto production, but as you also highlighted with carbon fibers, there are a lot of elements from, you know, steel and aluminum to carbon fibers to specialty design parts that go into all of these manufacturing. Do you have an assessment as to how the UK's exit will also impact your sourcing and your costs on that front, since all of those would be subject to tariffs and duties and customs check, not only intra-EU but also from the rest of them?
Very quickly, 2/3 of what we use in Coventry is dollar or euro denominated. Therefore, the net cost is already quite easily accessible. Moreover, I believe that a hard Brexit or no agreement for our industry will let us think twice about the long-term possibility to continue to have business in a country that is no longer what we're supposed to be, therefore a part of Europe. It is a totally different consideration from what it was at the time we invested. So.
Yeah, I would say we have a lot of experience at the BMW Group to operate production plants all over the world. We have, for example, a production plant in Spartanburg in the United States. We have one production plant in Mexico and also one in South Africa. And these production plants are not only producing local, they're producing also for exporting cars. For example, the X series is produced in the United States and is exported also to the European mainland. The core parts and elements of these cars are also coming from the European mainland. So we have a lot of experience to ship goods in time to the production plants to keep on the production plants running, and so the situation will be definitely also in the UK. So that's the reason why we are thinking, okay, we will find solutions to keep business continuity in our production plants, because we have this experience with other production facilities as well. And unfortunately, regarding you ask regarding if we have a time schedule, for example, how things will go on. Unfortunately, we don't have such a schedule. So we are also living as every competitor and also all the other businesses in a time of uncertainty, and we hope that this time of uncertainty will be finalized as soon as possible.
Yeah, if I can build upon that, what is in fact said by Mr. Fruijsmuth for BMW applies to almost all other OEMs. All our global players have production all over the world. So they are, contrary to some of the smaller suppliers, used to deal with the complexity of acting in a global market. However, let's also be clear that the trade flows these companies are managing and how they are managing them are also influenced by the type of trade relationship which exists between the countries where this happens. Okay. So as long as there's clarity on what that trade relationship is, companies can prepare accordingly. And so here, when it comes to the future trade relationship between the UK and the rest of Europe, that's still a big question mark. How will that look like? And as already said, if you look at that future, which will come after the transition period, in principle, for us there are different scenarios which we are thinking of, clearly. I mean, the ideal scenario is the one also which Mr. Vavasori highlighted. There's a combination single market continuing the single market concept and the customs union, which is highly unlikely. because at the end of the day, UK decided to leave the single market. We cannot have it all. Second scenario would be a customs union. Okay, but again, also there, the indications from negotiations are not very promising. And then the third scenario would be a fully integrated trade agreement between UK and the rest of Europe. Whatever that means, and then it's going to be a question of making sure that the negotiators come up with a trade arrangement which takes into account the concerns of the business community and avoids being too disruptive. Because at the end of the day, it would be a bit cynical to see that our relationship as European Union with Korea and Japan would be a better one than with the UK.
I think we have time for one last question here.
Josh Pisano from Politico. Do I have time for two if they're very, very short?
They're very short.
Both for Stefan. The first one is, can you just update us on your plans for warehouse capacity in the southeast of England? Are you still looking at basically stockpile components? And the second one was, do you plan any more of the workshops you had with your suppliers to educate them a bit about the Brexit process?
Regarding the additional capacity for storing goods, materials, production materials, I cannot give you too detailed information because I'm a customs guy, I'm not a logistics guy. But as far as I know, we are looking for additional space for store goods. But at the end, it's not possible also for us, and it's the same situation as we have it, as our competitors also have. It's not possible in the automotive industry to store goods for a long period. So we are producing just in time, just in sequence, and additional storage only enables to keep on production running for more than 1 or 2 days. So in other words, if you want to store goods to keep on production running for more than 1 week, you have to build the highest building in the whole world. Yeah, and that's the situation for everybody. Regarding our supply base, yes, we are in close contact with all of our suppliers. So we are getting frequently questions directly from the suppliers, where we are giving the answers to them. And of course, we intend to perform additional supply days in the UK and also on the European mainland to give our supply network a current status update on the negotiations, and also to intensify the education on customs clearance, for example, and give more advice how the supply network can prepare for example, applying the authorized economic operator status and for using simplifications in customs clearance.